That Analyst has been saying that the statement expected on Saturday can be a damn squib or a new benchmark, and asking, what are your thoughts? Can we expect anything tangible from President Cyril Ramaphosa?
Well, considering the timeline, we're not very far off from the sixth administration having started. And so, as the governing party, we shouldn't expect that the ANC will say much different from what was in their election manifesto. So it needs to be a reaffirming of their election manifesto with some priority areas and some tangible things that they're going to be pushing for. Remember, there's a distinction between the state and the party, and so the party needs to come across as very strongly in terms of what it is prioritizing, both internally in terms of its party structures, but also in terms of what it will be putting on the government's agenda.
Tessa, let's just look at the recent utterances by the Deputy President, David Mabuza. He was asked a question with regards to the President being misled. He seems to agree with that. The President was misled by Eskom as well as the Public Enterprise Minister. Then you have the Presidency coming out and denying that the President was misled in this regard. Do you see this overshadowing the January 8th statement in any way tomorrow?
I mean, I think it is a very interesting development. I think the Deputy President didn't sound ambiguous at all when he said that he felt that the President had been misled. And I think the statement by the Presidency really reflects the sense that we're playing some semantics here about what is planned and unplanned and what could they foresee. And I think Eskom needs to be asked for much more concrete actions and much more concrete outcomes. And so to tell the President to announce to the nation something that they couldn't guarantee was definitely at least a problem, if not actually misleading. And so it is a political question about why David Mabuza said what he did when he did, and whether or not this puts pressure on the President to be more firm with Eskom and with the Minister of Public Enterprises. So I think it is a red herring of sorts. But I think Eskom, the electricity crisis, has to be on the ANC's agenda. And so how it's dealt with in the statement will be either confirming what David Mabuza said or, again, reiterating a denial.
The World Bank's revision of our economic prospects, our economic growth prospects, how does this speak to how President Cyril Ramaphosa should address the nation on Saturday in relation to what he has planned together with the Minister of Finance, what their plans are about growing the economy of this country?
Yeah, so again, I don't think we should expect a lot of concrete things around the economy and policy, government policy. I think what we will hear is the ANC reiterating that they're going to be working on, they're going to be focusing on jobs and getting people into the economy. I think we'll hear a lot about that. I think we'll hear a little bit more about SMEs. And so we won't hear about policy, but we'll definitely hear about the stances that the ANC will be taking. So I think we'll have to wait another month before we hear about action plans that the President or the Finance Ministry have in store.
Tessa, out of the 108 years of the party's existence, 25 years have been spent in power. How would you describe that record?
I think the record is a problematic one for the ANC because it's one of progress, but limited progress, and particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, we have seen either things that have stagnated. So if you can think about issues around health, where we made a lot of gains up front and then kind of plateaued out. And so the ANC now needs to look for some new things. And so things like the NHI, things that are looking at some of the reforms they're looking towards in SMEs need to be things that they can put on the table as something new that they're offering the country. I think that the country is disillusioned with politics in general, with political parties in general, and particularly with the ANC, because if we hear the same things that we keep hearing year after year, we then start to think that this is an administration or a party in governance that has run out of ideas, that has run out of things that can really rejuvenate and excite the populace and give them a new confidence in the ANC. I think the ANC has eroded its confidence with the public, and I think especially in a place like Kimberley, in a place like the Northern Cape, they have a lot to answer for and a lot to prove.
Tessa, about the ANC itself and that narrative of a fight back from people within the party who are upset with the president for refusing to implement agreed party positions such as the expropriation of land without compensation and also the nationalization of the South African Reserve Bank. How are these playing out? Should we think it's those activities playing out when we see the president changing his schedule for the day this morning, no longer taking that walk, no longer going to the golf challenge? What should we be reading into these activities?
There's a lot that could be read into the president not being able to make commitments, and part of it may also just be pure exhaustion. It's been a very long week. There's been a lot of activities, so that might be the real reason. But I think maybe to answer the question slightly differently, if I was the ANC, I probably would have said, let's not do the 108 celebrations this year. Let's look like a party who is at work and who is unified, who's sitting around the table with each other, because the party does have a big challenge in terms of its unity. And President Ramaphosa has been the president of that party for 2 years, and he came in on a unity agenda, and that unity has just not come out. We've seen it time and time again where the party speaks from different mouths when people say one thing from an NEC and then something else comes out from a government official who's ANC. So they've definitely not managed the unity agenda, and they've not managed to look like a party who is at work. They look like they're a party that's at war with each other. And so they really need less flash and less party and less of the throws and much more kind of a serious take on organizational rebuilding and what they're going to do to make sure the organization rebuilds itself, and also what they're going to do to make sure that they're a better governing party going forward.
It's an important point, Tessa, you make. Let's look at this approach that the president of the ANC should take when delivering the statement, the January 8th statement, because I guess it all boils down to service delivery issues. So can the party hold its head up high, or should they be eating humble pie instead of birthday cake and recognize certain weaknesses and, tell the people what's the way forward in a practical way?
Yeah, I think it was one of the tricks that the ANC missed in the election as well in the May election, is that they didn't do enough to own up to failures. I think the ability to be honest about where the party has failed as opposed to only speaking about the things that you've done well, that shows a honest reflection. And the ANC keeps on telling us that they are self-reflecting, they are introspecting, but their rhetoric doesn't sound like it. Their rhetoric sounds like they're regurgitating things, and they're just looking for the quick wins. And I think we do need an ANC in governance that can say, these are the areas where we have not done well, and these are the specific interventions in those areas that we are going to do better at. I suspect that we're going to hear a lot, if not in the January 8th statement, but in the coming SONA, about things like the district model, because service delivery at a very local level is one of the big challenges, and also in lieu of next year's local election. The ANC needs to be starting to show that they are pinpointing where the weaknesses are, and they're starting to address them, both as an organization but also as a governing party.
The other thing that the January 8th statement allows the ANC is the ability to mobilize the party faithful to come in droves to vote in the 2021 local election. What kind of chances do they have?
Yeah, the 2021 election is going to be a litmus test for the ANC. Given what's happened in Tshwane and in Joburg in the last few months, they have another opportunity in those metros to try and win back the support of people on the ground. And I think it's going to be less about their ability to mobilize people to get into rallies and more about their ability to show and demonstrate that they're changing their model of governance, that they're going to have people who are much better equipped, especially at local government level, to deliver, and that they're going to be a responsive government. I think one of the things about the rallies, and the ANC is really good at rallies and mobilizing people, is getting bums on seats at a rally is not the same as getting votes. And I think they've learned that lesson over time, that just because you can fill a stadium doesn't mean that you can actually get people to vote. People want to see results in their communities in order for voting to happen.
So let's just talk about the party's base. Has that changed over the years? Because part of the ANC's strength, I guess, is its history. But the question would be, does the ANC still hold this sway over people in terms of those who grew up under apartheid? Do they still have the vote I'm talking about, that strong intellectual and emotional bond towards the ANC?
I mean, without a doubt, people have an emotional connection to the ANC. I've worked a lot with young people who weren't even born in '94, who have a strong emotional connection to the ANC. But again, an emotional connection is not necessarily going to translate into a vote. And I think one of the things we've seen with people deciding not to go to the polls is about that emotional connection, is about saying we don't want to vote for anyone else because we have this emotional connection to the ANC, but we're not ready to vote for the ANC either. And so the emotional connection can work in their favor in some ways, but I think in other ways it's also making people much more emotionally connected to the things that they're doing wrong or their inability to self-correct. So it's great to have a history, but if you don't live up to that history and you're not able to show that that history is so meaningful, people will either get resentful or apathetic.
Well, Tessa, the statement, January 8th statement presentation will be tomorrow morning in Kimberley, and as you've said, it's against the backdrop of poverty, non-service delivery, and lots of reports of corruption in terms of the state capture narrative that's currently underway in the country. Will it be a jovial ceremony?
It will definitely be jovial. No doubt about that. Again, the ANC knows how to engage in that kind of space really well. The question is going to be, will they be able to deliver an inspirational speech, and a speech that shows not only that they understand what's happening in the country, and I think that's what a lot of people have become a bit disillusioned with the ANC with, is that do these leaders, many of them who've been in government since '94 and have been living in sort of bubbles for the most part, not really living the lived experience of the black child in South Africa in the last 25 years. Can they really connect with the South African public and give the sense that they understand what's happening in the country and that they're responding directly to those things? If they cannot inspire confidence, it's going to be a nice celebration, and people will, it will look nice, but it won't necessarily land with people.
So let me ask you, yesterday the Democratic Alliance had a media briefing in Kimberley, and were accused of taking advantage of the fact that the ANC is in Kimberley, and they just running roughshod over that ceremony. What are your thoughts about the DA's sudden bringing together of a media briefing in Kimberley?
South Africa is well known for politics. I think that was a really, really good case of politics. I think it was opportunistic of the DA in many ways. I mean, their interest in issues around drought in the Northern Cape wasn't even something that came up during their election campaigning last year. So, again, sincerity, and the ANC is not the only party that South Africans are disillusioned with. They're disillusioned with the big parties in general. And so if you don't come across as sincerely being interested, and people can see through a gimmick when it comes around, and I think yesterday was a bit gimmicky from the DA, and they need to think about how do they look and feel like a party that's not just trying to outshow the ANC or show up the ANC's weaknesses, but one that's actually trying to run their own agenda. Yesterday was a reactionary move, I think, from the DA, and I don't think that many South Africans were bowled over by it.
These conversations will continue in the weekend. Tessa, we thank you very much indeed for your perspective. Be well.
Thank you so much for having me.